Good evening, dear viewers. Welcome to this week's Open Mic. It's a special edition of Open Mic, actually, and it will be taking you back to our history, Eritrean history. And our guest for this evening is Mr. Toni Locher. He is from Switzerland, but he is more of an Eritrean than he is from Switzerland. So, welcome to our program, Mr. Toni. Okay. Our viewers are, I'm sure, anxious to know who you are. So if you can tell us a little about your background and your association with the Eritrean history.
Mm-hmm. My being with the Eritrean, I'm not speaking that good English, but my being with the Eritrean history goes back to 40 years now. I was a young student, left-wing student. We tried to do the revolution in Switzerland, it failed. And as a student I was joining, there was a conference in Addis Ababa in 1971. I was there as a delegate from Switzerland, joining a worldwide conference of Christian students. Mm-hmm. I was working at that time with a Christian institution in Switzerland. And then I went to this conference in Addis Ababa in that hall at that time. And I was meeting the Emperor Haile Selassie. We shake hands with him. And I saw the Eritrean and Ethiopian students during that reception of Emperor Haile Selassie. They were going down to the ground, they were 2-3 meters away from him. So this was my first impression of Ethiopia at that time. And then I got in contact with Ethiopian and Eritrean students in 1971. Mm-hmm. I went to the Haile First University, putting some leaflets of the opposition students. They were in opposition to Haile Selassie. Mm-hmm. I was doing some dangerous things at that time, leaving some leaflets of the Worldwide Federation of Ethiopian Students in the Haile First Selassie University in the toilets. So I got in contact with Eritrean students. I got in contact with taxi drivers in 71 who were Eritrean taxi drivers. They told me I'm giving 20, 30, 40% of my income, which was not very high, to the Liberation Fronts, being ELF or EPLF. So I was interested. As a student, I was linked with some other liberation movements in South Africa with ANC, and Angola with MPLA, with PAGC, all these former Portuguese colonies. Mm-hmm. So I was interested in Africa. And from my family background, I was meant to be priest, to be missionary in Africa with the white fathers. So my mother wanted to be that I would go to Africa and be there as a priest and a missionary. I didn't. So at the end, I went to Eritrea. So I was in contact then with the Eritreans for Liberation in Europe, with the EPLF, foreign relations, Osman Saleh Sabe, and all these things. Quite difficult times in 74, 75. And then I knew more about the Derg, about Mengistu. So in 77, this was my first trip then to the Sahel, to liberated areas. Mm-hmm. We came through Sudan. It was not easy to enter the base area. I was in Fa base area, and this was my first trip we went even as far as Keren. It was in July 77, just a few days after the first liberation of Keren city. I went with Sebat Ephraim through the streets of Keren when people were celebrating this first liberation of Keren. Mm-hmm. So this was a very, and then we went back again to the base area. I was there in the hospital, in the underground hospital. Mm-hmm. I witnessed all these things which have been done at that time. So I went back to Switzerland, and we founded the Swiss Support Committee for Eritrea, because the humanitarian situation in Eritrea as a whole, and especially also in the liberated areas, was difficult. It was So this was the creation in September 1977 of Swiss Support Committee for Eritrea, which was affiliated or linked with Eritrean Relief Association.
Mr. Toni, You've told me that you came to Eritrea in 1977. That was your first leg of the trip. But 1971, you were fully acquainted about the situation of this part of the world, this part of Africa. Now, from your experiences there, and you've also told me that you had associations with other liberation struggles elsewhere in African countries. What made the Eritrean revolution so different, would you say?
Yeah, then in the 70s, this was the time when the other liberations movements got, these former Portuguese colonies were free, and so it was a little bit more difficult they became government, and it was a little bit difficult to deal with them. So I saw that Eritrea is a very unique liberation movement. It's not only me, there were a lot of other people like the famous, I always forget his name, with Abdelrahman Mohamed Babu. I loved him, I met him several times, and he was a very experienced, I was a young student, and he was an experienced African who knew the different African liberation movements very well, and he went to Eritrea. I met him also, and he was telling me about this revolution and this liberation struggle. So I got interested, and I was thinking, yes, this is I think I was dreaming of as a young student, because I was always a so-called tiers-mondiste, which means in French, it's a French expression, I'm linked somehow with the struggles of the peoples of the south of the third world, fighting for their liberation, their independence, and their freedom. So I was interested, and then I got, of course, I made different other trips then to the field. I was here in '78 during the strategic retreat when the Soviet Union started to side the Ethiopian Turk. I was here in 1980, 82, 3, 4. I joined the congresses of ERA, of Eritrean Relief Association. So I got, in concrete terms, I knew more about this special type of Eritrean liberation struggle. And this was, I mean, every journalist who came to the field at that time, he was surprised what you did at this time. And the people outside in Europe, they were always very critical. They told you EPLF is for sure putting some special type of juice in your coffee so that you don't see the reality, or that you are too much euphoric about the Eritrean situation in the field. But I didn't put anything in my coffee. That just gave me a good tea sometimes. And I saw the reality, that it was a very difficult struggle. It was a struggle for survival, fighting the Soviet Union at that time. I mean, the Derg, which was militarily very strong. I experienced the Soviet mix many times, and I was very scared. I met all these refugees in the Solomona refugee camps. The very difficult situation, and still I saw that EPLF was building up a new society, which I found this is very unique in the world. So this was not only one trip; it was several trips, and of course I got more and more in contact with the situation in the field, and I got more information. So, and then it happened also that I had a wedding ceremony in the field.
We'll get to that part, because it's quite interesting. That story, I want you to tell our viewers. But before we get there, as a foreigner coming to this part of the world, seeing a revolutionary struggle that was trying to achieve the impossible at that particular moment, and when there was no support from either the US, the Soviets, did you see this small revolution could win, could ultimately achieve its independence? I want your opinion in that.
I must tell you, coming from the outside, and I had a lot of contacts to analysts on Africa, and nobody believed in it. Really, nobody believed in it.
Nobody believed in
Nobody
it.
believed in the success, especially after the intervention of Soviet Union on the Ethiopian side. Everybody told me, it's no chance to survive because they are militarily that strong. So I was a little bit also not so sure if really I experienced the Soviet mix. I experienced the warships shooting from the Red Sea when we came from Port Sudan to Karora and then to the field. I was really, it was not easy for me as a white foreigner to experience the reality of that brutal aggression of the Ethiopian troops. I mean, you have been I think sometimes it was my hope that you would survive. It was a struggle for survival. And when I came from Karora to the south, to the far, I was a little bit scared because I heard the warships, the Soviet warships from the Red Sea. But when I was in the far area, I felt so protected. Because the hospitality, there was nothing. We had a little guest house, very simple, and we had our shies in the day and a little spaghetti. But I felt this strength of your movement at that time, and this made me be hopeful. When I was in the field, I was completely hopeful that you will survive. When I was a little bit outside back to Switzerland, hearing all the news and discussing with analysts, and then I thought it may be very, very difficult.
But you still went on with the cause. You still persisted to look back into the achievements of this small nation. But
yeah.
Why? What compelled you to be affiliated?
Yeah,
as such?
it was also the diaspora who helped me. There was a big Eritrean diaspora in Italy, in Germany, and so on. These days we had our regular Bologna festivals, and the Bologna festivals was the most important event for me, apart from coming to the field to Eritrea. The Bologna festival was the meeting of all the Eritreans. And there was so much hope. I met fighting girls singing there, and I met the musicians coming from the field to play. And this atmosphere of the Bologna Festival, this was part of the hope that you would make it and be successful in your survey. And I was always in summertime. This was part of my summer vacation to go to Bologna. Then to go to the film festival in Locarno, this is another thing. But Bologna was also always on my schedule. I felt the support the diaspora people gave to the struggle, and this was another thing which I thought this must be another factor, apart from what EPLF was doing in the field, of course.
Mr. Toni, I am, of course, part of this current generation, and this current generation has little awareness of what circumstances the Eritrean revolution went through to achieve independence. Now, Mr. Toni, my question is, I want you to recall what sort of circumstances were they when you visited? You told me there were MiGs that were bombing the people during that time. So what other circumstances can you describe from your experiences there?
Yeah, this was another life. We had to travel during nighttime. This was clear, but the roads were very bumpy. It was the never-ending bumpy road when we came. It was already a little bit difficult in Sudan, because in Sudan we had to get special permits, but this was quite okay. But then the situation in the base area, in the field, was. I told you, I felt protected, even if the MiGs were flowing over our heads in the morning. We were some people there, 3 or 4, and one lady from Switzerland. She put her white clothes on one of the trees to make it dry. So our friends came in the morning, just took it away, because if the MiGs are flying and seeing some color spots, then they would come again and bomb it. So it was, for us, coming from peaceful Switzerland, it was really, it was dangerous. But at the same time, we felt it. We felt protected by the fighters, by EPLF. So it was this mixed feeling. But with the time, of course, I knew a little bit more about the situation, that it's not too dangerous to travel. And I was more young. It was for me at the time. With time, several times being in the field, of course, you know a little bit more about the situation. And then, of course, I was not more scared. I was more interested in what's going on in the humanitarian field, how ERA was working in the field, about the workshops, about the hospital. I'm an obstetrician and a gynecologist by profession, so I went to the Rota Base Hospital. I had good friends there. I saw the operations. Then we started to fund from Suke. We started to fund projects, a little blood bank for the hospital, different other projects in the medical field. So then it's a time I was more interested in about the progress in the liberated areas. Okay. I went also to Afabed and Nakfa and all these places. It was not only the military struggle, it was only the whole development of this nucleus of the new Eritrean society in the field.
Yeah, because we had our own hospital there. And there were other things happening. We had our own small factories going on there. We even had factories that built shoes, that made shoes, and what have you. Did it fascinate you to see things like this happening?
Yes,
of course. In that place at that time.
Yes,
and in Africa.
Yes, I have seen the factory to produce. This for women, for sanitary towels for women. I have been to the factory where this Shida sandals. They made me a present. I have still this Shida sandals at home, one pair. I didn't use them in Switzerland because I want to keep them. So these were symbolic gestures where I knew about what was going on in terms of factories, in terms of the health service, this basic health service. I've met all the doctors who did the work at this time, not only in the Rota Base hospitals, but also in the different health stations. All these things I witnessed, and I was surprised because this was, I think at that time, and I can compare with other liberation movements, it was really unique, and this was really fascinating for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, again, still I want to hammer out on this one because the ideologies of self-reliance we've actually picked up from our revolution, and we knew that there was no one to help us out, so that's why we made all these things. Would you say if we did not pursue that ideology, would we have achieved our independence?
No, I don't think, because, you know, I mean, I was a student, I was fascinated by Julius Nyerere, the former president of Tanzania, and he was one of the figures of African Pan-Africanism, and he had also a type of African socialism in his country, in Tanzania, and he was also a little bit thinking about his self-reliance. And I was fascinated by him, by Julius Nyerere. And then I came to Eritrea and I saw it works. Self-reliance works. And it works, and it's the only chance to survive. Not only during the liberation struggle, but also afterwards. This is the model I think still today. I think, and I have now an experience of more than 40 years with so-called development theories about how Africa can develop and become independent, really independent, not only formally independent. And still I believe that this the model of self-reliance can be varying a little bit, and that they be adapted to the new situation of globalization. But still I believe that this is the model of success for any third world countries. So I saw the nucleus there, and I saw it was working. And it was the only way to survive this this very isolated struggle of EPLF fighting against the big two superpowers, and nobody, really, I tell you again, nobody in the Western world believed that this liberation movement would be successful against the Derg, against Mengistu Haile Mariam. This was, nobody believed it. So I mean, it's not only a theory, it's not only an ideology, the self-reliance. It was practiced. I'm not so keen on ideologies. I want to see them if they are working if they're working in the concrete situation, and it was working during the liberation struggle, and I hope still today, after 22 years, that still it's still a long way on the way of self-reliance, and it has to be adapted, of course, to the changing situation in the world. But still, I think it's. Some of the beliefs when I was a young revolutionary student, maybe they are left. I left them. Some of the ideologies we have concerning China. I was very linked with China at that time. We were admiring Mao Zedong. Some of these things maybe have left, but still in this model of self-reliance, I still believe, really.
Okay, Mr. Toni, you have also met the leadership of the EPLF back then, and you've also met the Tagada Lai and the Tagada Elite. What sort of life did they have amongst themselves? What that made them unique? What sort of life did they live?
We published a book in 1990, and we had some pictures of that time in that book. It's the only book, more or less the only book in German about this time in the field. And of course we met many of the leaders, because it was a family. I mean, it was not very hierarchic. You met now and then. You met the leaders of the EPLF, of course, or the president. So they were normal people. Fighting, they were Tagada Lais. The word, it says all. They were really fighting for survival, but not only for survival, but also with the aim of having a liberated Eritrea. And this was, of course, their daily life was this business of having a success in this 30 years long liberation struggle. And you never know. At the beginning, when I came, I didn't know who is who in the EPLF. So by the time, of course, I knew many of the leaders of the EPLF, and but you didn't recognize them. They didn't wear any signs that they are the leaders also in the military. So this was quite unique to be really. It was a family of fighters, of Tagada Lais.
So if you were a leader, they were not specially privileged with special food or anything?
I was privileged because I had good food. The leaders that took what was available at that time. So the guests, and especially the Westerners, we were having the best food all over the liberated areas at that time. So
okay, all right, Mr. Toni. Now I want to talk about the marriage part, because you got married at the field.
Yeah, this was.
Where was it, and how did that come about?
Yeah, this was an idea. I was not yet married in Switzerland. I had a Swiss woman. I was not yet married, so I thought. I was at that time in the student movement in Switzerland. After the '68 movement, it was not so common to get married. We were protesting against this bourgeois type of wedding ceremonies. Then I thought, as a revolutionary, I could go to Eritrea, and then it would be okay for me to get married, to make this petit bourgeois ceremony. We called in the student movement, we called this to get married. It's petit bourgeois. It's not our style. But in Eritrea, I thought this would be the convenient place to get married. Then I brought Doris, my former wife, to Eritrea, and the Eritrean friends, they were very happy. Because, you know, in the tradition of Eritrea, it's that if you are getting married, the wedding ceremony is a very big ceremony, huge ceremony. People are spending a lot of money and getting poor people is for poor people it's difficult to have this marriage ceremony. So at that time EPLS was also making information, please don't do too big wedding ceremonies, because it's during the struggle and in these difficult times, you should not do too big ceremonies. Then they told me, we are doing a very modest wedding ceremony with you, and at the end, of course, it was also a very huge ceremony. It was at night time in this Amberbeb place. I remember our friends from ERA. I was wearing the lowlanders clothes. Doris was wearing also the lowlanders clothes. So now one was Highlanders and one was lowlanders clothes. So we were having this Eritrean clothes, and it was a very nice ceremony. I even was telling some few words in Tigrinya about that I'm very happy to get married in the field. So it's a unique experience. It was symbolic, of course. It was, for me, as a person, it was a very unique experience, of course. And then for my Eritrean friend and for all the people in the area, it was a sign of that a friend of Eritrean struggle is coming to the field and getting married there in the field. This is a sign of sympathy and of solidarity. So this was, I think it was welcomed, and it was a type of experience also for the people who participated in the wedding ceremony with a band, Kunama band playing, and we were dancing. The stars above, and no mix coming at night time. We were very happy drinking some suwa also, which we prepared in the Locher hospital and so on. This was a very unique experience.
Okay, that's quite interesting. Speaking about the books you're holding in front of you, did you write them?
Yes, we were several authors. I was writing also. We published this in 1990, just 1 year before the liberation of Eritrea, and it's meant on the history of Eritrea in general and on the history of the liberation struggle, and especially also on the humanitarian situation, on the development work for which EPLF and ERA was doing in that time. So it's on different themes, on education, on medical, also on the outlook. We didn't know at that time. When we were in Bologna, we were always telling each other, see you next year in Asmara. We hoped to see everybody next year in Asmara, but in 1990 it was near to we felt it must come somehow. I was also I was in 1987, I was there during the second EPLF Congress, having a little speech in Tigrinya also during that Congress. It was a big experience for me, and all this experience I had from these different trips to the liberated areas. This is here in this handbook.
Okay, Mr. Toni, now still after independence, your sympathizing with Eritrea did not stop. In fact, it continued. My first question is, when Eritrea achieved its independence, what did you feel, and did you see a new Eritrea born? Because we're still in the nation-building process.
Yeah, you are still in the nation-building process. Of course, on the 24th of May of 1991, I was in Switzerland, and I heard about this news, and I was so surprised, and I went up on the roof of my house, and I was shooting to the Eritrea is free. So it was a unique experience, because 91, it was 20 years since 1977. It was a long time to wait for that unique day of liberation. Of course, I was really, it was yes. And then of course the coming years, I was coming then in 91 I was coming there for the HD Meskerem for the 1st of September. I was coming to Eritrea, and it was a beautiful situation because we always hoped that it will be liberated, but if it's really then here, and then of course we felt the joy of the people and diaspora people coming back and seeing the country. Of course it was the start of the nation building. I mean, it started already in the liberated areas. I told you the nucleus of the new Eritrean society was already there, but then you had to transfer the Amberbeb and the Nakfa or the field to Asmara. You had to make a transfer of the old structures which were already there to the newly liberated area, and to start to rebuild this country which was in a bad shape, of course, in
obviously.
May 1991. So then, of course, it was. Then in the coming years, it was beautiful. I could travel. I didn't have to go through Port Sudan with Sudan Airways, which always took a long time. Then I could take the Ethiopian Airlines at that time to Addis Ababa, and then come to Asmara, and then later on with Lufthansa and all this. It was much easier to come to Eritrea, so this was beautiful. And then we were here with Suke also to help the reconstruction of the country, to continue to help the development of the country. So we had a lot of projects here in the water area, in the education, in the medical field. So, but then I saw it's not so easy. It takes some time.
Exactly.
And then, of course, the Second War, 1980. I was here just in May 1998 when the war started. I took the last Lufthansa flight back to Switzerland, and I was shocked. This was a real shock for me, to this war with Ethiopia. And of course, it was more difficult than after the war to reconstruct, to start again from. Not from zero, but still it was difficult, and still you are in this process of nation building, of course. But of course, sometimes if I think back, it was easier in the field.
It was easier in the field.
Yeah, it was easy. It was a small family, and this is the country still not solved. The border question is not definitely still. That you feel that Ethiopia wants. I mean, I read all day these websites of Ethiopia. I read Tigray Online. They always discuss about invading Assab, taking back Assab, and they say we are strong now and we can take Eritrea, the former colony, back to our empire. So this is the reality. You are a free country, but still you are.
The hostilities have.
There is still a hostility. So. And I really want, my biggest wish is that would have peace in the Horn of Africa, and this is part of the whole process Eritrea is participating now. And so sometimes I remember the old times in the field, and I think even if the struggle was very difficult at that time, the situation now is, of course, you see a lot of developments. I mean, I see the young generation like you doing good work in different fields with most sophisticated items. I remember the video shootings we had in the field with these old cameras. So this is a lot of development I see. I see these developments in the medical field with the reduction of the mortality of the children, of the mothers. I'm an obstetrician, and any time in Switzerland, if a mother dies during birth, it's a terrible catastrophe, I tell you, and it should not happen. And in Eritrea it happens much more, but still, if I compare to 1991, the level of mortality, how many mothers died, and how is it today in 2013? It's a huge development you did, especially in the medical field. Mortality of children, mortality of mothers during birth, and this is what impresses me, what moves me as an obstetrician. I'm a doctor, and if I cry if a woman dies during birth, this is the most terrible thing for an obstetrician. So if I come to Eritrea and I see the figures, less children die, less mothers die. The health situation is now like this, that before you had an average age where you died of 37 in 1991, and now you're having 64. My age is 64. So as an Eritrean, I have my life experience as an Eritrean is now 64. This is reality. This is what interests me, not politics about anything. So sometimes I'm not a politician, but really a doctor, and I see the development of the country here, and then say, yes, this country has a chance.
Okay, Mr. Toni, thank you for your time. But before we close, any last messages to the people of Eritrea, because we are celebrating our 22nd independence anniversary here?
Yes, I told you before, I was always going to Bologna since 91, since 22 years. I'm almost in May for the celebration. I'm coming to Asmara. This is part of my my annual schedule, so it's a good time to celebrate with friends, to meet also all the friends from the time of the struggle also. So for me it's a good time, and I wish you very good and happy celebrations for the 22nd anniversary of liberation of Eritrea. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Toni, for your time. Dear viewers, that wraps up this week's special edition of Open Mic. It's good night from us.